Alright, Spring WebFlow. So this is going to be the last topic of today. So we'll actually get things done today a bit early. So here we are going to learn what is and why we want to use WebFlow, and we are going to talk about URL mapping to WebFlow definitions. We'll talk about flow elements. We'll talk about the actions. We'll talk about input and output mapping and subflows. What is and why WebFlow? The motivation of WebFlow is that in traditional web applications where WebFlow concept is not used, the navigation logic, we call it UI flow, are managed programmatically. Okay, so that's exactly what we have done so far. So basically, your handler method return a logical view. The logical view will be handled by the view resolver to select the view. Okay, and then page get displayed, and user will do some actions, and that action will trigger another invocation of the handler, and then it keep going. It just keep going. Okay. The problem is that it's pretty hard to maintain and reuse this navigation. Whenever you need to change the flow of navigation, you have to change source code. You have to actually change the the logic of returning a different logical view name. And in many cases, some navigation logics are pretty similar to many applications, like a reservation logic. Whether you are making a reservation for hotel or whether you are making a reservation for the airline, the seat, or making a reservation of a ticket, the reservation flows are pretty typical, and we like to actually capture the same navigation logic as independently configured, let's say, flow, so that could be actually used in different applications. So that cannot be done without using WebFlow. Okay, so Spring WebFlow is basically a flow definition language that is used to define a flow. So again, we are talking about navigation declaratively. So you're going to see this flow is defined as an XML file. And another thing we want to do is navigation logic is now separated from presentation logic. And this is a good thing. If you want to change your navigation logic, you go to this navigation logic XML file and change rather than your code, okay, or your view, okay. And because it's actually the navigation logic that is declaratively specified in XML, it is easier to maintain and change. Meaning it's easier and to maintain and change than changing your code. And it's reusable in multiple applications because it's XML file. As long as you create XML file that captures navigation logic and it contains some variables and it contains some input and output variables, if those things are actually changed for different applications, the same navigation logic could be used. So that's the idea in many applications. So what is a flow? What is the navigation logic? So a flow encapsulates a reusable sequence of steps that can be executed in different applications. Again, hotel search and booking flow. Okay, so typically search and book navigation logic is something like a search criteria is presented to a user. User will enter some search criteria. Maybe if it is hotel, then it's going to be city. And starting date and end date and things like that, and then search result will be presented. Okay, and then user will select one of those items to book a hotel. So this search and booking flow could be actually used again, hotel reservation or airline ticket reservation or concert reservation and things like that. Okay. Right is the Garrett information architecture diagram illustrating a reference to a flow that encapsulates the steps of hotel search and booking process. Okay. So what makes up a typical flow? flow is made of a series of steps called the states, and we are going to see the states in a few minutes. Okay. Entering a state typically results in a view being displayed to the user. Okay, so typically your flow will start displaying the first page. Okay, and that is the entry state. Okay, and then when the page is displayed, user will perform some actions like submitting a form or clicking a link. That will trigger transition to other state. Okay, which will result in a different view. Okay, so this is typically the case. Alright, so now let's move on to a bit more detail underlying technology for Spring WebFlow. So far we just understand the concept of WebFlow. It's basically capturing the flow logic or navigation logic in a form of declaratively specified things. In this case, it's going to be XML. Alright, so URL mapping to flow definition. So URL mapping for WebFlow applications are done differently than non-WebFlow applications. So so far what we have done, when WebFlow is not used, the default URL mapping is through this request mapping, handler mapping, interface and implementation of it. Basically, this guy is looking for request mapping annotation in controllers to find which controllers and which method of the controller should handle a particular URL request. Okay, so that's what we have learned so far. Okay, now in WebFlow enabled application, the URL mapping is going to be handled by flow handler mapping class. So in this case, it will try to search for flow definition file under the same name. Okay, so name of the URL path / name of the URL path.xml file. So let's say an example. So suppose there is the simple URL, like there is a URL that ends with a /simple. In the flow enabled application, first it will try to find this simple directory, and underneath it will try to find simple.xml file. So this is the flow definition file. And if it is not present, then it will just do non-flow based things. So it will try to find the controller with the request mapping. Okay, so in flow enabled application, it will always try to find the flow definition first for that URL. Okay, for guest search URL, it will try to search for flow definition of guest search directory on the flows. And by the way, this is actually configurable. So in the configuration file where this configuration flow definition files are located, this is a base, and then it's going to use a name of the URL and as a directory, and then name of the URL as a name of the flow definition file. Okay, so if there is a guest details URL, it will try to find this guest details.xml flow definition file on the guest details directory first. And if it is again found, that's what it's going to use for flow starting the flow. If it is not found, then it will do normal things. It will try to find annotation, the request mapping annotation in controllers. Okay, so this is the WebFlow configuration for URL mapping. So first, you have to actually have a bean flow handler mapping class. So this is the flow mapping class that you have to have, flow handler mapping class. Okay, so that has to be declared as a bean in your context configuration file. And one of the property is flow registry. So flow registry property indicates where these flow definition files are located. Okay, so in this case, this flow registry matches with another flow registry, the element. Okay, and this one should match. It will try to find WebFlow ID flow registry here. So it finds it, and this is a base path, WebFlow flows, WebINF flows. Okay, and then we have two flow definition files. One is guest search.xml, and the other one is a guest details.xml. Okay, so that's how, that's how, oops, sorry about that. Yeah, this is how this URL will end. Try to find guest search.xml file from here, because this is actually set as a base here, base path. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's how WebFlow is configured, along with information about where WebFlow definition files are located. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about the flow elements. So we are talking about flow definition file. So flow definition file will start with a flow as a root element, like this. Okay, and everything in that flow definition file, in every state, will be defined inside this flow element. And the first state defined is a float starting point. So if you have a first view state like this, that is a starting point. And typically this is actually displaying a page. Okay. Okay, view state element. So you want to use a view state element to define a step in the flow that renders a view. So this is how you are going to display a page. So here you say view state ID equals enter booking details. Yeah, what it means is that, I want to find enter booking details.jsp page in the same directory this flow definition file is located. Okay, so if the state above renders, it will render web INF hotels booking enter booking detail.jsp page if the flow itself, meaning if the flow definition file itself is located in the same directory. So flow definition file typically is located in the same directory along with the views. Okay, so this is a view state. So as you can see, you're going to actually do some exercises here. So we have a booking flow.xml file, and then we have enter booking details.jsp page. Okay, so enter booking flow.xml file will have this view state as the first entry point. Okay, in that case, what gets displayed is the enter booking details.jsp page, this guy. Okay. Okay, transition element handles the event. So when a view page is displayed, user will typically perform some actions. Okay, so actions are, one of these two: clicking a link, hyperlink, or submitting a form. Okay, so suppose there are, something like this in a page. So this is a case: user events are captured as event ID, request parameters on click link. So on the bottom here, okay, so we have a hyperlink here, okay, and so this is hyperlink, and this is the submit form, okay. Now when you are clicking a hyperlink, there is URL, and then there is actually underscore event ID equals something. So that something is going to be captured as a transition, okay, for clicking a link. For submitting a form, the name of the event, in this case, underscore event ID underscore search. So, this search will be captured as an event. Okay, transition event. So in this case, these two are considered as transition event. Okay, so the way you are going to specify transition is that when enter booking details page is displayed, when next event occurs, I want to go to another state whose name is review booking. Okay, I'm going to let you guys to spend a few seconds to digest what I just talked about in this slide. Okay. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm gonna just pause. So let me repeat one more time. So in this is a view state, which means this enter booking details.jsp page gets displayed, and that page might have these things, this hyperlink or submitting a form. So either of those will be captured as an event. Okay, the way it captures the name of the event is, in the case of clicking a link, it will actually have a parameter called underscore event ID equals something. That something will be captured as the event. When submitting a form, the name has to start with the underscore event ID dash search. The search will be captured as an event. So now you're going to have a transition element, okay, in the view state. What it means is this: when there is a next event occurs, I want to go to a state which is review booking. Okay, so review booking could be typically in another page. All right, finally we have an end state element. Okay, so use end state element to define a flow outcome. Okay, when the flow transitions to end state, it terminates and then outcome is returned. Okay, so this is the simple yet complete flow. So we have view state. We are starting from enter booking details, and then we have a transition. When there is a submit event, we are going to go review booking the state. So review booking state is another view state. So it will display review booking.jsp page. Okay, and then it has 3 different transitions. It has a confirm, revise, and cancel. Maybe one of the each of these is in fact a link or a button. And whenever one of these event occurs, when confirm event occurs, it will go to booking confirmed. When revise event occurs, it will go to enter booking details. It's actually going this state, again. When cancel event occurs, it will go to booking cancel. So confirmed and canceled is end state. Okay. You can actually see this flow definition file. If you are using STS, you should be able to see the flow in graphical manner. So it's the starting state, the starting page, end page, and middle page. That's one of the exercises we are going to do. Alright, so that's our exercise 1. So let's take a look at the exercise 1. So if you run this code, let's run this code. It's pretty straightforward. WebFlow simple. Run. I did Maven install, and so I'm going to just run it. Okay, so let's see, it is done. Okay, so this is a start page, and if I go to middle page, I go to middle page, and then if I go to end page, I go to end page. And in this case, I'm going to skip the middle page and go to the end page. Okay, now one another advantage of using flow is that remember when you are actually capturing data in multiple pages, for example, when you are creating registration process, okay, you might want to actually display multiple pages, because a single page is not providing enough space for the user enter the information, right? So you might in fact have multiple pages. So whenever user is actually going back and forth between those pages, the things could be actually lost, okay? Typically you save those things into a session, but session might be actually a little bit too big, okay? Instead, you want to capture that as a flow. So by using a flow, you can actually have a scope of a flow scope, which is smaller than session but bigger than single request and response cycle. Okay, so that's another advantage. So in this case, this is pretty simple things. Whenever I go to middle page, and if I go to let's go to end page, and if I go to previous page, you go to middle page. And here, this is probably not showing the benefit of all the fields that were filled up before, okay, because I don't have any forms here. But if you are actually creating multiple registration page for a user, whenever you go back and forth, those values will be preserved during that flow. Okay, and once the flow is done, then the information is gone. Okay, all right, so this is basically very simple flow. Now, if you take a look at the so this is what we have done. So if you take a look at the files, we have very simple flow definition file called the simple.xml file, which is on the simple, and then we have JSP pages, the views in the same directory. Okay. Now, if you take a look at the configuration file, so we're going to actually have a WebFlow simple WebFlow XML file in which we define the file location. So we have a single flow definition, and this is a base path. Okay. All right. And this is the flow mapping things, and which actually referencing this flow registry here. Okay. And then we have a flow definition file which has a starting page, middle page, and end page. And in the starting page, when user click next, it goes to the middle page. When user click the skip, it goes to the next page. And here, when the in the middle page, it goes to the end page and things like that. And so start page, the JSP, we have event ID and next. This is the event. So this is captured as next and skip. Okay. And here page 2 is just having next event. Okay. So if you take a look at the sequence of operation, the first time you are running this application, index.jsp page gets displayed, so it goes to simple. Okay. So now Spring Framework at this point will try to find if there is in fact a simple.xml file on the simple directory. If there is a simple.xml file on the simple directory, then it will use that flow definition file. If it doesn't exist, then it will try to find the request mapping annotation that have the simple as a URL. Okay, since we have simple directory and there is a simple.xml file, okay, so that is we have this guy. Okay, so it's going to use that definition file. So it will try to use this definition file, which is the start page. So it has a view state, and this view state happens to be start page. So it will display start page.jsp page. So that is basically this guy, start page, JSP page, and so now user will have user could click one of these two links, this guy or this guy. So this is next and this is skip. And if the user click next, okay, then based on this transition, it will go to the middle page. So it goes to the middle page here. So because this is a view state, it will display middle page.jsp page. So that's basically how things go. You can actually take a look at this flow in the visual tool by clicking flow graph. Okay, so now I'm going to actually ask you guys to modify the project for your own exercise. Since you have enough time, I'm going to give you some time to do this. So I want you to do this. From the middle page, when you click next, I want to go to middle page 2. So we're adding another page. Okay, from the middle page 2, the green event triggers the transition to end page. Okay, and you want to change event the index.jsp page going to simple one. Okay, so you're basically creating another definition file. Okay, all right, so let's have 10 minutes break, and I'll give you guys about the 20 minutes to do this exercise. So we'll be back in 30 minutes, which is 10 minutes after 3 o'clock. Next topic is state types. So far we have seen the view state, but there are a few more we are going to learn. Okay, So view state, we have covered a little bit of this, and we also talk about end state a bit as well. There are three more states we are going to learn: action state, decision state, and subflow state. And we are going to take a look at even view state in a bit more detail. So view state is for rendering a view, and users can user can participate in the flow. So when a view is displayed, user action will trigger an event, and that event will trigger a transition to a different state. So flow execution pauses until that event occurs to resume the flow. So event can be either a form submission or clicking a link, as we talked about. Okay, so this is something we have seen before, right? So we have the view state, and if there is a transition on search event, it will go to search guest state. Decision state is evaluating a Boolean expression to decide which state to transition next. So in our hands-on lab exercise, what we are going to do is when you perform guest search, and if there are in fact the more than one people, then you want to give a list of those guests. However, if there is only one guest based on search, then you want to go to exact result of that particular user right away, right? So that's basically what you want to do in decision state. So here in decision state, if the guest size is equal to 1, then we go to exact result state, in which we are going to display that particular person's detailed information. If the guest size is greater than 1, then we are going to display list of the guests rather than the displaying a particular user, because we want the user to select a particular user from the list. Okay, so this is a decision state. Subflow state is you can launch another flow as a subflow within a current flow. Okay, the reason you might want to create a subflow is that if that subflow can be actually captured as reusable flow in another flows or in another application, then that could be actually a good thing to be captured as a flow. Okay, so this is for enhancing the reuse of displaying guest details. It is created as another flow and used here as a subflow. So here, guest details state will be guest state is subflow state. Is basically using guest details as a subflow. Okay, and now this is a way that we can provide some input to the guest details. So here we have guest input, and the value is flow scope.guest. So this is the input name that could be used inside this guest detailed subflow, and the value is coming from the guest. This is a key in the scope of flow scope. Okay, so this flow scope guest probably have been saved in some place else before, and then once that is done, it will transition to the new search. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This is in guest details. Yeah, I actually take a look at what this particular transition is all about. We'll do that in our hands-on lab. Okay. Yeah, I was not quite clear what that is. Okay. All right, so that is the subflow state. Now let's take a look at the action state. Action state is for performing an action. Okay. So execute an action that is specified in the expression attribute. So the action that needs to be specified, action that needs to be executed, is specified in the expression, the evaluate an expression, and this is basically the method of a particular object. So I'm going to call search method of get service object, passing guest search criteria as an input. And the result will be saved into flow scope as guest. So this is a key, and the result of this is going to be is probably the collection of guest object will be saved as a value of this guest key in the flow scope. Okay, and if it has been successful, it will go to check result size. Okay, yeah. So sorry. In our previous page, yeah. So if if the guest details subflow returns with the new search, then it will go to new search. So once subflow is done, then transition could occur as well. So same deal here. Once action is performed, and if the action has been successfully performed, then it will go to check result size. Okay. All right. So what is and why actions? So the reason we want to use actions is that most flows need to express just more than a view navigation logic. In many cases, some business logic needs to be invoked, right? So that's when you are going to use an action. So within a flow, there are several points where you can execute actions, and these points are on flow start. When you start your flow definition, when you start your flow, maybe you want to actually execute some business logic first. Okay, so it's certainly possible to have an action as a starting point. Okay, and on state entry, so we see an example in the previous. So basically, this is action state, and then we perform the action. Okay. And when view render, so when the view is rendered, you might want to create the model attributes or something like that through execution of an action. Transition action or state exit and flow end. So basically, action could be actually performed pretty much everywhere. Okay. So basically, the point is that there is no limitation in terms of performing an action. So action could be performed pretty much everywhere. So how do you define action? Actions are defined using concise expression language, and basically, is using this syntax. You can just call this object and method, and you can actually also use the unified expression language as well. Evaluate elements. So the action you will use most often defined through the evaluate element, and use the evaluate element to evaluate an expression at a point. Yeah, so you can have an evaluate like this, and the one in the previous slide, you remember that we have a Spring Framework expression language we talked about in previous presentations. So that's certainly possible. So I don't have an example of that here, but that's certainly possible. But you can use the evaluate element, and then you provide expression, and inside expression you can actually invoke methods of Spring Beans or any other flow variable. Okay, so saving and converting evaluate results. So once expression returns a value, then typically you want to save that returned value into a scope called the flow scope. So this is a flow scope I was talking about. So this flow scope is maintaining attributes that are only valid during that particular scope. So it's actually starting a flow and ending flow. Between start and end of the flow, this flow scope object is gonna maintain all the attributes. Okay, so in this case, you perform the expression here, and the result of is gonna be saved into hotels attribute in flow scope object. Okay. We are going to actually use this exact sample application in our hands-on lab. So we are going to see how all these things is in fact is going to work out. Okay. All right. So this is a complete, relatively complete flow. So we are starting from flow element. Now we could have an input. Okay. So here, this input ID is going to be used. So this input hotel ID is supposed to be saved in the flow scope. Okay. When it gets started, so it will be fed as an argument to this expression, and then once that is this expression is evaluated, the result will be saved into booking attribute of the flow scope object. Okay. Okay, and then so this on start. Okay, and then. Yeah, so this is the case that, this is the case. We have we are actually executing an action. We are executing some the logic before we start the view state. Okay. Because what we want to do is, we want to display this booking information as part of this enter booking details.jsp page. Okay, so now enter booking details page get displayed. Inside it will probably use this booking attribute. It will try to access the booking attribute. Okay. Now then when there is a submit, it will go to review booking, and then these are the things that we have looked into before. Okay, now let's talk about input and output mapping a bit more detail. So we have seen example of this input here. Okay, so let's talk about these things in a bit more detail. Input and output mapping. So each flow has a well-defined input and output contract. Flows can be passed input attributes when they start, and they can return output attributes when they end. So use input element to declare a flow input attribute called hotel ID. Okay. So basically, it's going to create the hotel ID attribute, but it doesn't have any value at this point, right? So input values are saved in the flow scope under the name of the attribute. For example, the input above would be saved under the name of hotel ID. Okay. Now, if you want to save the actual value, then you can say hotel ID, that is going to be the value of this. Okay, so, we want to assign this value to this hotel ID in the scope object. Okay, so if the input value does not match the declared type, a type conversion will be attempted. Okay, that's input. Output as a flow out attribute. So use output element to declare flow output attribute, and output attributes are declared within end state that represent specific outcomes. So in this case, the output is going to be name a booking ID. Okay, so this output value is obtained from the flow scope under the name of the attribute. So this booking ID is from this is an attribute in the scope flow scope. Okay, so output above would be assigned the value of booking ID variable, booking ID attribute from the flow scope object. Use the value attribute to denote the specific output value expression. So if you want to assign the value to confirmation number with this booking.confirmation number, then that's basically the output value that is being assigned. Okay, so these are the examples. Input, and then end state is actually taking the output. Okay, we talk about subflow a bit. Okay, so flow may call another flow as a subflow, and the flow may wait until the subflow ends, and then respond to subflow outcome. So why create subflow? Again, reusability and encapsulation. So subflow state. Use the subflow state, the element, to call another flow as subflow. So that's basically what we have seen before, right? Okay. And then transition, depending on the outcome of this subflow, guest created or creation cancelled. Depending on that transition, it will, in this case, go to different state. Okay, so it will call create guest subflow, then waits for it return. When the subflow returns with a guest created outcome, okay, then the new guest is added to the booking's guest list. So then it will be evaluated if transition is on this guy. Passing a subflow, yeah, so you can actually pass a subflow input, okay, using input like this. Mapping subflow output. Simply refer to subflow output attribute by its name within the outcome. Yeah, so this is basically what we just talked about in previous example. So this is the transition, input and output. Okay, so same example. All right, so I was waiting for this exercise because just explaining is a little bit exhausting. So let's actually take a look at the sample application, then we'll actually play around with this one. So all the concept that we have learned in the presentation, we are going to in fact exercise with this. Okay, so let's run this application. So let's see how this one works. Okay, let's wait until this is done. Oh, I have not built it. So okay, so Maven install. So let's wait until this is deployed. Maybe I have to actually, yeah, I have to remove this guy and try again, because the one that was deployed is doesn't have any code. So we'll try to run it again. Okay, it's done. So let's. Okay, so now is searching for a guest. So if I say S, there are several people that start with S. So it will display a list of the people. So if I click Sang Shin here, then it will display that particular person's detailed information. Okay. However, if I call it new search, now, however, if I say Shin, there is only one person who has that that name. So in this case, it will display the person's detailed information right away. Okay, so it's a relatively simple flow, but it will, you know, exercise the things that we have learned. Okay, so this is what we have done. So if you take a look at the code, so we have two flows. One is the guest search, and then we have a guest detail. So this is a subflow that is being invoked inside the guest search.xml file. Okay. So this is the hotel webflow.xml file. This is a configuration. So, you know, we define two flow definition file, guest search.xml and guest details.xml. Okay. And now let's take a look at the guest search.xml file. So here we are going to create a model object and save it as a variable. So here, you know, basically we are just creating an object called guest search criteria from this class. Okay, so, you know, basically it's like you know, new and of this class. Okay, so this object right now does not have any real data. Okay, it's just an object of this type. Okay. And then we are starting our state. So we are going to display the model search criteria. So, you know, it's going to display guest search criteria.jsp page. Actually, we are going to actually look into the flow later on. So let's actually just go through, you know, these states. Okay, this guy, we have action state and decision state and the retrieve and things like that. So we're going to actually look into these things in a bit more detail, step by step. So you can certainly take a look at this in a graphics mode. And this is the guest details.xml file. Okay, so now we're going to actually study the sequence of the flow. So when the application gets started, it goes to guest search right away. Okay, so because it's a Webflow application, you know, Spring Framework will try to find this file, guest search.xml file on the guest search, and it finds it. Okay, so it will do Webflow. So let's take a look at the guest search.xml file, as we talked about, it's going to create the guest search criteria object from this class. Okay, and then it will display guest search criteria .jsp page because it's a view state. And then the model object is guest search criteria. This is the one. Okay, in this case, view ID and this guy is all same name, but this one doesn't have to be the same. This is just the model object. Okay, so you can pass this one as a model object, but in our JSP page, you might actually use reference to this guy. Okay, so all right. So now you're gonna take a look at the guest search criteria JSP page. Okay. The one thing that you might want to try is, for your own exercise, if you set the value of the name variable of the guest search criteria Java, so, let's say guest search criteria Java, when you display this, this is domain class. Yeah, so this is guest search. This guy, if you say name XYZ or something like that, okay. Okay. So when this criteria object gets created here, the name will be set with the XYZ. Okay, so in this case, when we run this application, we are going to actually see the XYZ thing. You see, it's set actually XYZ. Okay, so this page is guest search criteria JSP page. Okay, all right, so that is basically, and then so we just did the exercise. So we are going to take a look at guest search criteria.jsp page. Okay, so it is a form object, and it's going to actually, it is a command name called the guest search criteria. So this is the command object is going to use to display. That's why it was displaying XYZ in the input field, because it's using this one as a model. So this is the model that was passed here as a model. Okay, so that gets displayed. Now if user say, the user is going to actually enter some data like S, okay, and click, that will generate the search event. So the search event, okay, the search event, so if I click this guy, the search event will trigger a transition. So search event is sent, okay, like this. So now the next transition is this. So for search event, it will go to search guest state. And search guest state happen to be action state, which means it will execute this code. So it will call guest service and search, and it will actually use guest search criteria object. Okay, so guest search criteria object is basically whatever you typed in here. Whatever you typed in, like S or SHIN. Okay, so that is a model object. So that is a model object. Okay, and then it will be saved into guest attribute of the flow scope object. Okay, and then it will be transition. If this has been successful, if there has not been any exception, that is considered as a success. So in the action state, the transition means is whether that method has been, so this method has been executed successfully or not. If it has been success, it will go to check result size state. Okay, all right, so remember the result has been saved into guest attribute of the flow scope object here. Okay, so now you're going to go to check result size. Yeah, so this is the code. So when this is a guest service search, that is basically it will perform search, and basically it will just send back result. Okay, and this result is a list of guests, and that is going to be saved into guest attribute of flow scope object. Okay, so now you're going to go to check result size state. So check is going to check result size state, and that is a decision state. So depending on whether guest size is 1, which is the case when I search criteria is SHIN. If the search criteria is S, then this guest size is supposed to be 4. Okay, so if it is not 1, it will go to guest list state. So we're gonna go to guest list state. So that is view state again. So in this case, it's going to display guest list.jsp page. Okay, so that is a guest list.jsp page. So guest list.jsp page is basically list of the people in a table format. Okay, and then when a particular user is link is clicked, that will generate a select event. Okay, it will pass this query parameter, which is select event, and it also pass the name of the guest. Okay, and if the user click new search, if user say new search, that is considered as a new search event. Okay, all right. So now, before transition to guest details occurs, it calls the guest service by name and save the result as a guest. So guest list. So before it goes to the guest details occurs, it will actually perform these things first. Okay, so it will actually call the request parameter name and find a name and expression. It will save as a guest attribute in the flow scope. Okay, all right. Now so this is basically finding that particular guest. Now guest details state is going to be so guest details is actually subflow. If you remember, guest details is if you take a look at the guest details, it is actually subflow. Okay, so the guest details is subflow, and this is the guest details, the contents. So basically, it will get the guest. It will have an input argument, which is coming from guest attribute of the flow scope object that has been saved here. Okay, so we got that. So that's guest, and then it will go to guest details. It goes to guest details view state, which means it will display guest details .jsp page. So that is a guest details .jsp page which display that particular person's detail. Okay, if the size is 1, then it goes to guest details state right away. Okay, so hopefully you got the sense of how things work. Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys to play around this one, and let me see. So we're gonna actually stop right here.